Washington, D.C. was alive with the quiet hum of power and danger. Neon lights reflected off glass skyscrapers, casting jagged patterns onto the rain-slick streets below. The capital was a city of secrets, whispers, and hidden alliances, where a single misstep could ruin a career, a family, or a life. In the heart of the city, a story was about to unfold, one of ambition, betrayal, and a forbidden attraction that could destroy everything. Ethan Blackwood was not an ordinary man. The only son of Senator Richard Blackwood, he was expected to inherit not just wealth but a legacy of influence, fear, and calculated charm. Senator Blackwood had built his empire with a mixture of iron-willed determination, political cunning, and ruthless negotiation. Loyalty came at a price, often bought with money, favors, or quiet threats. Yet Ethan, his only heir, had always refused to walk the line his father had drawn. Ethan was reckless, charming, dangerous, and irresistibly attractive. He moved through life like a storm, leaving fascination and destruction in equal measure. Women, nightclubs, whispered rumors, and forbidden secrets, he chased them all with a devilish grin. But tonight, his usual bravado would be tested in ways he could never anticipate. In the Grand Oak Hotel, a dimly lit suite smelled of expensive perfume and stale champagne. Soft jazz music flowed from hidden speakers, mingling with the laughter of unseen guests. Velvet furniture created an illusion of comfort, but beneath the luxury lay tension that would erupt in chaos. Sitting across from Ethan was Roxanne Miller, a woman whose beauty could stop time and whose cunning could destroy empires. She wasn't just a woman, she was a game, a challenge, and a secret that could unravel everything Ethan had ever known. "One more drink, darling?" Roxanne's voice was silk, her words wrapping around him like a spell. Ethan smirked, pouring another measure of whiskey into her glass. His tie hung loose, shirt partially unbuttoned, the picture of a carefree heir. "Do you know what would drive my father mad?" he asked, leaning closer. "If he found out I've been spending campaign money on someone like you." Roxanne's laugh was soft, but her eyes sparked mischief. "Maybe I'll tell him myself," she teased, tracing a finger along the rim of her glass. Ethan recoiled slightly, a grin tugging at his lips. "You wouldn't dare!" The night was still young, but destiny has a way of interrupting even the most carefully crafted illusions. Suddenly, the suite door burst open. Flashing lights from cameras illuminated the room, followed by the commanding voices of federal agents. "FBI, stay where you are." In a heartbeat, the calm of the suite dissolved into chaos. Cameras clicked relentlessly. Shouts echoed. Papers and glasses toppled to the floor as Ethan froze, caught between panic and defiance. Standing in the doorway was Isabella Stone, a journalist known for her relentless pursuit of truth. At 27, she had made a name for herself exposing the secrets of the powerful. Her eyes, sharp and fearless, locked onto Ethan with the intensity of a predator. "Ethan Blackwood," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Son of Senator Richard Blackwood, caught red-handed with a known escort. The American public deserves an explanation. What do you have to say?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He had been in scandals before, but nothing like this. The cameras closed in, the microphones extended, and for the first time, he felt the weight of consequence pressing down on him. His father's empire, his carefully curated life, was teetering on the edge of ruin. "Take those cameras out," Ethan barked, shoving an agent aside. His voice trembled with anger, but underneath it was a raw, unrestrained fear. He was powerful, but not invincible. Isabella's eyes narrowed, her lips curving into a knowing smile. She had expected resistance, and yet there was a spark in his defiance she couldn't ignore. The storm of scandal was just beginning, and neither of them would walk away untouched. Outside the suite, the city carried on unaware. To the pedestrians on the wet streets below, this was just another night in the capital. But for Ethan and those drawn into his orbit, everything was changing. One wrong move, one slip of the tongue, and careers, relationships, and lives could unravel. Roxanne leaned in closer to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't hide from this. Not from me. Not from her. Not from your father. You're in deeper than you realize." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He knew she was right. He had always played the rules his way, believing charm and cunning could shield him. Tonight proved that even the cleverest of plans could collapse under the weight of truth. Meanwhile, Isabella began recording every word, every expression. Her instincts told her the story wasn't just about a scandalous affair, it was about power, corruption, and secrets too dangerous to remain hidden. Each click of her camera felt like a strike, etching history with consequences that would ripple through the highest echelons of society. As the hours dragged on, the suite became a battlefield. Words were exchanged, threats whispered, and alliances shifted in the blink of an eye. Ethan realized that Roxanne had her own agenda, one that was only partially aligned with his desires. She was unpredictable, a force of nature who could either save him or destroy him. The night stretched on, revealing the first cracks in Ethan's carefully constructed world. Trust, loyalty, and deception collided, creating a tension that no money or influence could erase. Isabella's presence was a reminder that the truth always finds a way, and Roxanne's proximity was a temptation he could neither resist nor fully control. By the time dawn approached, the city outside had begun to stir, indifferent to the chaos unfolding within a single suite. But for Ethan, Roxanne, and Isabella, the events of the night would set in motion a chain of consequences that would affect not just their lives, but the fate of everyone tied to the Blackwood legacy. Power, love, betrayal, and ambition, these were the forces at play. And Ethan Blackwood, for all his charm and recklessness, would soon discover that not even the son of a senator could escape the consequences of desire and deception. The first whispers of the story were already spreading across the city. Ethan Blackwood caught in scandal, but the truth was far more complex, darker, and far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. And as the sun rose over Washington, D.C., one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The morning sun crept through the tall windows of Ethan Blackwood's apartment, but its golden rays did little to warm the cold tension that had settled over the city. Overnight, the scandal had exploded across every news channel, every social media feed, and every whispered conversation in Washington, D.C. The world had watched Ethan's life unravel in a single night, and now he had to face the consequences, public and private. Ethan sat at his sleek glass desk, staring blankly at his laptop. Headlines scrolled endlessly. Blackwood scandal rocks Capitol. Ethan Blackwood, playboy or politician? Secrets, lies, and a senator's son. His father's name loomed over every story, his reputation now tarnished by association. The gravity of the situation was suffocating. He had survived countless reckless nights, flirtations with danger, and business deals that could have gone south at any moment. But this was different. This wasn't just a private indulgence leaking into the public eye. It was a calculated strike against him. Someone had ensured that tonight would be the night his carefully constructed world would fracture. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Ethan called, his voice hoarse, betraying the anxiety he tried to mask. The door opened to reveal Marcus Donovan, his father's most trusted advisor and a man who seemed to know every secret in Washington. Marcus's expression was a mixture of concern and frustration. "You have exactly 24 hours before your father publicly addresses this," Marcus said bluntly, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "Do you understand what that means? 24 hours to either control the narrative or watch everything collapse." Ethan rubbed his temples. "And what exactly do you suggest? Pretend nothing happened? Spin a story about charity or an accidental meeting?" Marcus shook his head. "No, you need leverage, Ethan. You need a story that gives you power in this situation. And right now, you have two options: Roxanne or Isabella. One can destroy you, the other can save you if you play it right." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Roxanne or Isabella? You think I haven't considered them? One is a wild card, the other a relentless journalist. Neither is predictable, and both have agendas that don't include saving me. That's why you need to choose wisely," Marcus replied. And quickly, outside the apartment, the city's pulse beat faster. Reporters camped outside the Blackwood residence, drones hovered above, and social media had become a battlefield of opinions, accusations, and speculation. Ethan knew he couldn't leave the apartment, not with cameras watching every movement, not with his father's wrath hanging like a storm cloud over him. The sound of a message pinged on his phone. It was Roxanne. "Meet me at the Lincoln Memorial. We need to talk. Alone." Ethan's pulse quickened. Meeting her now could be dangerous. She had already proven she was unpredictable, her motives hidden behind layers of charm and deception. Yet, ignoring her might be even more perilous. She was part of the storm, and he needed to understand whether she was ally or adversary. By the time he reached the Lincoln Memorial, dusk was settling over the city, painting the marble statue in hues of orange and purple. Roxanne was already there, leaning against the steps, her eyes scanning the horizon. She looked calm, almost too calm, like a predator waiting for its prey. "You're late," she said, a smirk tugging at her lips. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Traffic. And I assume you didn't call me here just to enjoy the sunset." Roxanne laughed, a sound that sent a strange thrill through him despite the tension. "No, I came to offer a deal." "You're in over your head, Ethan. This scandal, it's bigger than your charm, bigger than your father's influence, bigger than anyone imagined." Ethan frowned. "And what deal would that be?" "You need me," Roxanne said simply. "I know people. I have access to information that could neutralize the threat posed by Isabella. But you need to trust me fully, or this story will bury you, and your father along with you." Trust. The word tasted bitter on Ethan's tongue. He had learned, through years of reckless living, that trust was a currency rarely afforded in Washington. Yet, the stakes were high, and Roxanne had proven time and again that she could manipulate situations to her advantage. "And why would I trust you?" he asked cautiously. Roxanne's gaze softened, just enough to make him question her sincerity. "Because you have no choice. Because I could destroy you as easily as I could save you. And because, in this game, you're either the predator or the prey." Ethan studied her for a long moment. Her words were dangerous, but there was truth in them. He had played the predator for years, yet for the first time, he felt exposed, vulnerable. "Fine," he said finally. "Tell me what you need from me." Roxanne's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Everything. Your network, your contacts, your secrets. And you'll have to follow my lead, no questions asked. This is bigger than us, Ethan. The story Isabella is chasing. It's connected to a conspiracy that could topple governments." Ethan swallowed hard. "Conspiracy?" Roxanne nodded. "Not just any conspiracy. One that involves your father's closest allies, foreign influence, and shadow organizations that operate in the gray areas of law. If this leaks, the scandal we saw last night will look like child's play. You're standing at the edge of a precipice, and Isabella is about to push." The words hit him like a physical blow. Ethan had faced threats before, from rivals, from enemies, even from his father. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just about his reputation, it was about survival, about choosing allies in a game where the rules were unclear. And the stakes were deadly. The next few hours were spent planning, strategizing, and navigating a maze of dangerous possibilities. Roxanne guided him through covert communications, hidden networks, and a series of calculated moves to undermine Isabella's investigation. Ethan felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration. This was a game he could play, if only he could keep his wits sharp. Meanwhile, Isabella Stone was already 2 steps ahead, sitting in a small cafe across from a surveillance van. She analyzed the latest footage, piecing together patterns, inconsistencies, and whispers of information that could expose not just Ethan, but the powerful web surrounding him. She had learned long ago that truth was rarely straightforward, and in Washington, power often protected secrets that were meant to stay buried. Ethan and Roxanne's alliance grew in secrecy, but with every move they made, Isabella's presence loomed larger. She had the instinct, the resources, and the determination to expose them. And as the night deepened, Ethan realized that his attraction to Roxanne, a dangerous, intoxicating pull, was both a weakness and a weapon. By the time the city was cloaked in midnight darkness, Ethan understood that the scandal was only the beginning. Secrets that had been buried for decades were emerging, threatening not just him, but everyone he had ever trusted. And with Roxanne by his side, the line between ally and enemy blurred, making every decision a gamble with consequences that could be fatal. In the shadows of Washington, D.C., power shifted, loyalties fractured, and a game of deception began that would test the limits of love, ambition, and survival. For Ethan Blackwood, nothing would ever be the same. Trust was a luxury, betrayal was inevitable, and the true face of danger was only just revealing itself. As dawn approached, Ethan and Roxanne stood atop a building overlooking the city, the lights below like scattered jewels. They knew the storm was coming, a storm that would force them to confront not only their enemies, but their own desires, fears, and vulnerabilities. And as the first rays of sunlight kissed the skyline, Ethan made a silent vow. He would survive, no matter the cost. But in Washington, survival always came with a price, and he was about to learn that some secrets were too powerful to control. The following morning, Washington, D.C. was alive with tension. News outlets scrambled to report updates on Ethan Blackwood's scandal, while the city's elite whispered behind closed doors, assessing the fallout. What had begun as a private indulgence had escalated into a political earthquake, and Ethan could feel the tremors shaking every corner of his life. He moved carefully through his apartment, checking messages, analyzing communications, and preparing for what he now realized was a war of perception. Every phone call, every text, every social media post had to be meticulously calculated. There was no room for mistakes. Roxanne appeared at his door without knocking, as though she owned the building itself. She was impeccably dressed, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes sharp and alert. She carried a folder, thick with documents, photos, and intelligence reports. "Morning sunshine," she said, with a teasing smirk that barely masked the urgency in her voice. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I was going to say, who sent you? But apparently the answer is, no one does." Roxanne chuckled softly. "Exactly. No one. That's why I'm here. We need to move fast. Isabella has already contacted sources in your father's office. She's building a network that could corner you in ways even Marcus can't predict." Ethan's stomach nodded. "And what's your plan? Because at this point, I don't just need spin, I need control." She opened the folder and laid out a series of documents across the table. "We hit her before she hits us. We manipulate the flow of information, plan the right leads, and make sure she's chasing shadows instead of truth. We turn her into a pawn in the game she thinks she's controlling." Ethan leaned in, studying the evidence, the strategies, and the risky maneuvers Roxanne suggested. Each move was dangerous. Each action had consequences, but the logic was undeniable. If executed correctly, they could not only survive the scandal, they could dominate it. But Roxanne's eyes lingered on him longer than necessary. "And there's another layer," she said quietly. "Something even Isabella doesn't know. The people behind the scandal are not just targeting you. They're testing us. They want to see if you can handle the pressure. If you can't, they'll strike harder, and the consequences won't be limited to your career." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "So this is bigger than just a scandal?" "Much bigger," Roxanne confirmed. "And that's why you have to trust me completely. We don't have the luxury of hesitation. Every move you make from now on could be the difference between survival and ruin." The morning passed in a blur of planning, strategy, and reconnaissance. By noon, Ethan was exhausted, mentally drained from processing information, anticipating every possible scenario, and preparing for the unpredictable. But Roxanne was relentless, pushing him to stay sharp, to think like a player who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. By late afternoon, they were ready to make their first move. A carefully orchestrated leak, an anonymous tip, designed to mislead Isabella and her team, was sent to several journalists. Roxanne monitored every reaction, her fingers flying over a laptop as she tracked the digital footprints, watching the carefully constructed deception unfold. Ethan observed in silence, a mixture of admiration and wariness. Roxanne was brilliant, cunning, and fearless, a dangerous combination that both intrigued and terrified him. He had always thrived on control, but with her, he felt as though the reins were only partially in his hands. As evening fell, Ethan returned to his apartment, but sleep eluded him. He replayed every interaction, every word, every glance shared with Roxanne. There was an undeniable chemistry, a magnetic pull that made the danger feel exhilarating. Yet, he reminded himself constantly, trust was a liability, especially in a city where power and betrayal were two sides of the same coin. Meanwhile, Isabella Stone was not idle. She had intercepted fragments of the false leads planted by Ethan and Roxanne and immediately sensed the deception. Her instincts, honed through years of investigative journalism, told her that someone was orchestrating the narrative from the shadows. She gathered her team in a dimly lit office, the walls lined with monitors, documents, and surveillance footage. "They think they can outsmart us," she said, her voice steady but tinged with intensity. "But no one manipulates the truth in DC without leaving a trace. Find it, every email, every phone call, every whisper. I don't care what it takes." Her eyes fell on a photo pinned to the board, a candid shot of Ethan and Roxanne together. "And this," she continued, "explains a lot. Roxanne Donovan. She's the key. Someone is protecting him. But at what cost? And why?" As night deepened, the city became a chessboard of secrets, lies, and power plays. Ethan and Roxanne navigated through a labyrinth of danger, planting evidence, intercepting communication, and creating layers of misdirection. Each success brought a fleeting sense of control, quickly replaced by the realization that Isabella was closing in, relentless and precise. In the quiet moments between maneuvers, Ethan and Roxanne shared fleeting glances, brief touches, and unspoken connections. The tension was palpable, a mix of adrenaline, desire, and the ever-present threat of exposure. Roxanne leaned close one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know why I'm helping you?" Ethan met her gaze, trying to read the truth behind her eyes. "Because you benefit if I survive?" She smiled, enigmatic partly, "but also because I see potential in you. Potential for more than scandal, more than survival. You could play this game at a level no one else can, but only if you're willing to let me guide you." The intimacy of her words lingered, making Ethan question not only his instincts but the nature of their alliance. He was drawn to her, dangerously so. Yet he reminded himself that affection in their world was a tool as much as a weakness. Over the next few days, their plans began to unfold. Isabella was forced to follow a trail of misinformation, chasing phantoms while Ethan and Roxanne solidified their position. The city, unaware of the intricate battles behind closed doors, continued its daily rhythm. Politicians maneuvered, media outlets published, and the public speculated. One evening, as Ethan returned from a clandestine meeting with a high-ranking contact, he found a note slipped under his apartment door. It was unsigned. "You're being watched. Every move, every word. Even Roxanne might not be what she seems. Trust no one completely." His heart raced. The warning confirmed his deepest fears. This was bigger than a scandal. The forces at play were invisible yet omnipresent, their reach extending into every corner of his life. He called Roxanne immediately. Her voice, calm yet sharp, came through the line. "I knew this would happen. Someone is trying to rattle you. Don't react emotionally. Stick to the plan. We have contingencies for everything, even shadows like this." Ethan exhaled, trying to steady his thoughts. "And if we're walking into a trap, then we walk through it together," Roxanne replied simply. The days blurred into nights as the tension escalated. The lines between ally and adversary, truth and deception, love and manipulation became increasingly blurred. Every action had consequences, and every choice carried weight. Then came the breakthrough. Roxanne intercepted a confidential email from one of Isabella's sources, a name that, once revealed, could shift the balance of power entirely. "This," she whispered, her eyes gleaming, "is the leverage we need. With this, Isabella's investigation can be redirected, and the people behind the scandal will reconsider their strategy." "But it's risky. One wrong move and everything collapses." Ethan nodded. "Do it. I trust you, but be careful." As the plan unfolded, Ethan realized he was no longer merely surviving. He was navigating a complex game of power, desire, and strategy. Roxanne was his guide, his ally, and perhaps something more, but he had to remain vigilant. In Washington, trust was rare, and betrayal could come from the most unexpected quarter. That night, as they stood on the rooftop of a building overlooking the Capitol, Ethan and Roxanne shared a rare moment of quiet. The city lights shimmered like distant stars, the weight of secrets heavy on their shoulders. "You know," Ethan said quietly, "if we survive this, it won't be because of luck. It'll be because of strategy, foresight, and maybe a little bit of courage." Roxanne smiled, resting her hand briefly on his arm. "And maybe a little bit of trust," she added, her eyes meeting his. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Trust. The word lingered in the air, fragile yet potent, promising both connection and danger. He understood now that the game they were playing was more than survival. It was about understanding who they could rely on, and how far they were willing to go to protect their secrets. As the night deepened, Ethan felt the stirrings of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. Hope that he could navigate the labyrinth of deceit. Hope that he could protect his father. Hope that he could emerge from this storm not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and perhaps even victorious. But Washington had a way of testing its players, of exposing weaknesses at the most critical moments. And Ethan knew, deep in his core, that the storm was far from over. The next move would be the most dangerous yet, and the consequences could be irreversible. In the shadows of the city, the web of secrets grew tighter, and the players moved like pieces on a chessboard, each waiting for the other to make a fatal mistake. For Ethan Blackwood, the game was only beginning, and survival meant more than navigating scandals. It meant understanding the true nature of power, loyalty, and the dangerous allure of trust. The first light of dawn in Washington, D.C. felt unusually heavy, as if the city itself sensed a storm brewing beneath its polished surface. Ethan Blackwood awoke with a tight knot in his chest. The warning note had left him restless, haunted by the invisible eyes that tracked his every move. Trust, he reminded himself, was a currency far too valuable to spend recklessly. Yet with Roxanne Donovan at his side, the line between caution and vulnerability blurred more than he dared to admit. Roxanne arrived without fanfare, her expression calm yet piercing. She handed him a coffee, her fingers brushing his momentarily, sending an unexpected warmth through him. "Sleep well?" she asked, though her eyes betrayed the urgency that lay beneath her composed exterior. Ethan shook his head. "I feel like I'm already 3 moves behind." "That's why you're not allowed to act alone today," Roxanne replied. "Every move we make has to be calculated, and every contingency accounted for. Isabella is more dangerous than you think. She won't hesitate, and she's smarter than most give her credit for." Ethan nodded, his mind already racing through possibilities. The digital trail of deception Roxanne had orchestrated was holding, but he knew Isabella's intuition could unravel it if they weren't careful. By mid-morning, they had mobilized a small team of discreet contacts people. Ethan trusted implicitly, though trust in their world was always provisional. The plan was audacious. Ethan would stage a controlled public appearance, designed to divert attention from the scandal's deeper undercurrents, while Roxanne manipulated the flow of information behind the scenes. The media frenzy was already at its peak. Cameras lined the streets outside Ethan's family estate, flashes igniting as reporters and paparazzi jostled for position. Every step he took, every word he spoke, was a performance meticulously designed to mislead the public while protecting the truth. Inside, Roxanne monitored the network of communications with surgical precision, feeding Ethan updates in real time. "Focus on the optics," she whispered into his earpiece. "Your expression, your tone, every gesture. It tells a story they won't question if you control the narrative." Ethan moved through the crowd, projecting confidence, charm, and composure, while his mind remained sharp, analyzing each reaction. The applause and flashes of cameras were nothing more than tools, distractions in a game far more complex than public perception. Meanwhile, Isabella Stone observed from a distance, hidden behind the guise of a routine assignment. Her instincts screamed that something was being orchestrated, and every detail she captured fueled her determination to uncover the truth. The dance of deception was intricate, but she had long ago learned to read between the lines. Back inside the estate, Roxanne's hands moved deftly over her laptop, intercepting messages, rerouting leaks, and ensuring that the trail led Isabella exactly where they wanted. Her eyes were a storm of focus and intensity, betraying the calm exterior she projected to Ethan. Hours passed, each one fraught with tension, until finally, the staged appearance concluded. The media left with a narrative, carefully curated to obscure the scandal's true depth. Ethan exhaled for the first time in days, but Roxanne's eyes remained sharp. "This isn't over," she reminded him. "This was only a single move. Isabella will adapt, and someone else is still pulling strings. We need to anticipate the next wave." Ethan leaned back, the adrenaline still coursing through him. And if we're wrong? If this next wave is something we can't predict? Roxanne's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. Then we improvise. And we survive. Together. The words lingered, fragile yet powerful. Ethan felt the weight of their alliance, both strategic and intimate, pressing against the edges of his guarded heart. He had always operated with control as his ally, but Roxanne had introduced a variable he hadn't anticipated: trust. However reluctant, and something dangerously close to desire. As night fell, Washington's skyline glimmered with lights, reflecting off the Potomac like a river of stars. Ethan returned to his apartment, only to find a shadow waiting in the doorway. Isabella. She stepped forward, her expression unreadable, her presence both threatening and mesmerizing. We need to talk, she said, her tone calm but edged with steel. Ethan's heart raced not with fear, but with the thrill of the confrontation. I didn't expect a personal visit, he replied, masking the tension in his voice. I didn't expect to need one, she countered, but things are unraveling faster than I anticipated. And you, Ethan, are not as untouchable as you think. Roxanne appeared silently behind him, her presence a protective shadow. Ethan instinctively stepped slightly closer to her, a silent signal of their bond. But neither wanted to escalate unnecessarily. Isabella, Ethan began carefully. I don't know what you want, but I suggest we keep this professional. She laughed softly, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. Professional? In this city? Professionalism ended the moment you stepped into the limelight. Ethan, everyone has an agenda, and everyone plays their game. Don't pretend you're the only one. Her words hit with precision. Ethan realized she was right. He had underestimated her, assumed she was a pawn rather than a player. And now, standing in the dim light of his apartment, he understood the stakes more clearly than ever. Over the next hour, words became weapons, each conversation a delicate negotiation of truth, half-truths and calculated revelations. Isabella's intentions were complex. She wanted exposure, but she also sought leverage, knowledge that could shift the balance of power entirely. Ethan countered carefully, revealing just enough to satisfy her curiosity while protecting his secrets. Roxanne, ever vigilant, guided him with subtle signals, ensuring that no misstep would allow Isabella to gain an advantage. When Isabella finally left, Ethan felt the tension slowly ebb, replaced by a simmering anticipation. He turned to Roxanne, whose expression was both approving and cautious. You handled that well, she said, a rare smile touching her lips. But don't mistake this for victory. The night is far from over. Ethan nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Washington was a city of shadows, where alliances shifted like sand, and trust was the most dangerous gamble of all. Over the next several days, the delicate dance of deception intensified. Ethan and Roxanne executed covert operations, intercepted communications, and planted misinformation with precision. Isabella pursued leads relentlessly, each step bringing her closer to truths they had carefully concealed. But beneath the strategy, the chemistry between Ethan and Roxanne simmered, electric and undeniable. Brief touches, lingering glances, and moments of shared intensity created a tension neither could ignore. Yet they remained acutely aware any vulnerability could be exploited, any emotional entanglement a potential liability. Then came the unexpected twist: a leak from within their own circle. A trusted contact had betrayed them, sharing fragments of information with an unknown party. The revelation hit like a thunderclap, shaking Ethan's confidence and forcing him to reconsider every assumption. Roxanne's response was immediate and uncompromising. We contain it, she declared. We trace the leak, identify the source, and neutralize the threat before it escalates. And we make sure Isabella doesn't see the opportunity to exploit it. Hours turned into tense, sleepless nights as they navigated the labyrinth of betrayal. Each revelation, each countermeasure, brought them closer together in an intricate dance of necessity and desire. Ethan found himself relying on Roxanne not just for strategy, but for clarity, for guidance, and increasingly, for something he had long denied himself: connection. As dawn approached, the city quiet but vigilant, Ethan understood the truth. Survival in Washington required more than intelligence, courage, and strategy. It required trust in those rare few who had proven themselves indispensable and the courage to act, even when the stakes were personal. Roxanne stood beside him, silent yet resolute, and he realized that she had become more than an ally. She was a mirror, reflecting the sharpness, the ambition, and the vulnerability he had long hidden. Together, they were navigating a treacherous game, where the next move could be fatal. But the potential rewards were immense. And in the quiet moments before the city awoke, Ethan made a decision. He would not merely survive this storm, he would confront it, master it, and define the rules of the game on his own terms. Because in Washington, D.C., shadows were everywhere, and betrayal was inevitable. But so was power for those daring enough to seize it. And Ethan Blackwood, guided by Roxanne's brilliance and fueled by his own ambition, was ready to claim it. The city of Washington, D.C. never truly slept, but tonight it seemed almost alive with whispers and shadows. Ethan Blackwood's apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a command center. Screens glowed with encrypted data, secure lines buzzed with activity, and every surface was strewn with dossiers, maps, and digital devices. Roxanne Donovan moved seamlessly through the space, orchestrating communications with a precision that was almost surgical. Ethan watched her, a sense of mingling with the tension that always seemed to cling to them. Each day, the stakes escalated. The game they played was no longer merely strategic, it was personal. Trust, desire, and danger collided in ways neither could ignore. "We've traced the leak," Roxanne said, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "It came from someone inside your closest circle, someone you've relied on for years." Ethan's jaw tightened. "How many people know?" "Two," Roxanne replied, "and one of them is very careful. The other, not so much." She paused, eyes scanning the data on her screen. "If we act fast, we can control the fallout. If we hesitate, we're exposed and Isabella will be waiting." Ethan's mind raced. Betrayal was not new to him, but it had never come this close. He had always relied on loyalty as currency. Yet the discovery of a traitor within his inner circle shook him to his core. Every relationship, every interaction, suddenly felt tainted with uncertainty. "Then we move," he said finally, voice steady but sharp. "We find the traitor, neutralize the threat, and ensure Isabella doesn't get a single advantage." Roxanne nodded, her expression unreadable. She had become the anchor in his storm, the partner who could balance his instincts with calculated strategy. And yet, even as they worked, a subtle tension lingered between them, a mix of unspoken attraction and the knowledge that any misstep could have disastrous consequences. The investigation led them through the underbelly of Washington's elite society, private clubs, backroom dealings, encrypted communications. Ethan and Roxanne traced the thread of betrayal with painstaking detail. Each lead was a puzzle piece, and every revelation heightened the stakes. Late that night, they confronted the first suspect, Marcus Leland, a longtime associate who had earned Ethan's trust over years of shared ventures. Marcus's eyes were sharp, calculating, but he faltered under Roxanne's meticulous questioning. "You've been feeding information," Ethan said, his tone measured but icy. "Why?" Marcus hesitated, then tried to deflect. "You don't understand. It's not what you think." Roxanne cut him off, her gaze piercing. "Spare us the excuses, Marcus. Every word you've said, every action you've taken has consequences. And right now, you've jeopardized everything." The confession came slowly, reluctantly. Marcus admitted to leaking details to an unknown third party, driven by greed and the desire for influence. The realization was sobering. Betrayal wasn't always about ideology, it could be mundane, human, and devastatingly effective. Once the immediate threat was contained, Ethan and Roxanne turned their attention back to Isabella. She had been waiting, watching, and subtly manipulating events from afar. Ethan understood that her presence in their lives was both a complication and a catalyst, a challenge that demanded ingenuity, patience, and sometimes ruthlessness. Their next move was risky, a direct engagement with Isabella to gauge her intentions and potentially redirect her actions. The meeting was arranged in a nondescript location, chosen to provide anonymity while allowing them to maintain control. When Isabella arrived, her presence was magnetic. Every gesture, every glance, carried weight, and Ethan felt the familiar pull of danger and desire intertwined. "You've been busy," Isabella said, her voice calm but sharp. I expected you to be more vulnerable after the leak. But you seem resilient. Ethan smirked, masking the tension beneath. Resilience is necessary when dealing with people like you. Roxanne's presence was subtle yet powerful, a constant reminder that Ethan was not alone in this game. Together, they navigated the conversation with careful precision, revealing just enough to satisfy Isabella's curiosity without compromising their position. The dialogue was a delicate dance. Isabella probed for weaknesses, Ethan parried, and Roxanne subtly guided the exchange, ensuring that control remained firmly in their hands. The stakes were high, any misstep could expose their vulnerabilities, and Washington was unforgiving to those who faltered. After hours of strategic maneuvering, the meeting concluded without overt conflict, but the tension was palpable. Ethan knew that Isabella would return, that she would adapt and challenge them again, and yet, beneath the professional fod, there was an undeniable chemistry, a recognition of intellect, ambition, and danger that drew them toward one another even as they opposed each other. Returning to their safe house, Ethan and Roxanne allowed themselves a brief moment of respite. The adrenaline from the confrontation lingered, mingling with an unspoken acknowledgement of the connection that had deepened between them. You handled her well, Roxanne said softly, a rare warmth in her voice. Better than I expected. Ethan met her gaze, feeling the unspoken tension between them. And you? You've been incredible. As always. There was a pause, pregnant with possibility, before Roxanne's attention returned to the task at hand. We can't afford distractions. Not now. Not with what's coming. He nodded, understanding the truth in her words. But the moment had been shared, and it lingered, a subtle acknowledgement that beneath the layers of strategy, manipulation, and danger, there was something human, something real. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan and Roxanne intensified their efforts, intercepting communications, monitoring Isabella's movements, and fortifying their positions within the intricate network of Washington's elite. Every decision was calculated, every action deliberate. Yet even as they maneuvered through this treacherous landscape, the personal stakes deepened. Ethan found himself increasingly reliant on Roxanne, not just for her strategic brilliance, but for the clarity and strength she provided. Their bond had evolved beyond professional necessity, becoming a partnership of intellect, instinct, and unspoken emotional resonance. Late one evening, as they reviewed data in the dim glow of the command center, Ethan found himself reflecting on the complexity of their situation. Washington was a city of facades, where loyalty was fluid, and power was often wielded by those willing to manipulate shadows and secrets. Survival required not just intelligence and courage but an acute awareness of human nature, the motives, fears, and desires that drove every action. Roxanne noticed his contemplative silence. Thinking about the bigger picture, she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. Ethan nodded. Always. We've handled immediate threats, but the real game, it's only beginning. Isabella, the traitor, the others lurking in the shadows are all pieces in a puzzle we haven't fully seen yet. She leaned closer, her presence grounding him amidst the chaos. Then we keep moving. We anticipate, adapt, and stay one step ahead. That's how we survive. That's how we win. The tension between them was electric, a blend of professional respect, shared danger, and an attraction neither could fully articulate. Yet they remained disciplined, understanding that vulnerability, however tempting, could be exploited. As the night deepened, a new alert flashed across their screens, a signal that Isabella was making a decisive move. Ethan and Roxanne sprang into action, orchestrating a countermeasure designed to anticipate her strategy and maintain control over the narrative. The operation was intricate and perilous, requiring coordination, timing, and absolute precision. Ethan's mind raced through every contingency, every potential outcome, while Roxanne executed her role with seamless expertise. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated by bursts of communication and rapid decision-making. When the dust settled, the immediate threat had been contained, and Isabella's maneuver had been anticipated and neutralized. Ethan exhaled, the adrenaline still coursing through him. We did it, he said, a mixture of relief and triumph in his voice. Roxanne allowed herself a brief smile. For now. But this is far from over. Isabella will return, and the game will escalate. He nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Washington was a city of power, deception, and ambition, and their struggle was only just beginning. But for the first time, Ethan felt a sense of clarity amidst the chaos, a recognition that with Roxanne by his side, he could navigate the shadows and confront the challenges ahead. And as they stood together in the dim glow of the command center, the bond between them, professional, strategic, and personal, was undeniable. In a world defined by secrets, manipulation, and danger, they had found an alliance that was unshakable, a partnership capable of facing even the darkest shadows. The night stretched on, filled with quiet determination, and the knowledge that the web of intrigue surrounding them was far from fully revealed. Ethan understood that the battles ahead would test every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of trust he had placed in those around him. But with Roxanne at his side, he felt ready to confront the challenges, ready to navigate the complexities of Washington's power structure, and ready to face Isabella's relentless pursuit. Because in a city where betrayal was inevitable and danger lurked at every turn, survival and victory depended on precision, strategy, and the rare few who could be trusted implicitly. And Ethan Blackwood, guided by Roxanne's brilliance and his own unyielding resolve, was determined to emerge not just unscathed, but triumphant. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, cutting across the command center in sharp, slanted lines. Ethan Blackwood sat at the head of the room, fingers drumming a silent rhythm against the polished surface of the table. His eyes, however, were far from idle. Every alert, every piece of intelligence displayed on the multiple screens before him, demanded attention. The night's operations had been successful, but the victory was fragile, temporary at best. Roxanne Donovan moved behind him with the grace of someone who had long mastered the balance between subtlety and authority. She leaned slightly over his shoulder, her sharp eyes scanning the streams of data with a level of focus that left no room for error. "We need to anticipate Isabella's next move," she said, voice calm but edged with urgency. "She's not the type to retreat quietly. Every action she takes is calculated, and she learns quickly from every encounter." Ethan exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "I know. That's what worries me. She's dangerous in ways we haven't fully quantified yet. And now, with Marcus exposed, there are bound to be ripples we haven't accounted for." Roxanne nodded. "Exactly. Her network is vast, and she thrives in the chaos of half-truths and shadows. If we don't adapt quickly, we risk falling into her traps." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down like a heavy fog. Washington, with all its power, politics, and intrigue, had become a labyrinth where every step required vigilance, and every interaction carried the potential for betrayal. Ethan's mind raced, cataloging possibilities and contingencies. "We need allies," he said finally, his voice low. "Not just those we can control, but people who can operate independently, who understand the stakes and are willing to act without hesitation." Roxanne's gaze sharpened. "I know just the person." By late afternoon, they had arranged a discreet meeting with Alexander Reed, a former intelligence operative whose reputation for discretion and efficiency preceded him. Alexander was a man who thrived in the shadows, capable of manipulating complex situations without ever revealing his presence. Few could claim to understand Washington's hidden corridors of power as he did. He arrived punctually, dressed in understated gray, his demeanor calm and collected. Ethan extended a firm handshake, and Alexander's eyes met his with a calculating intensity. "Ethan," Alexander said, voice smooth but commanding. "Roxanne, it's been a while since I've seen a situation this intricate." Ethan gestured toward the data they had compiled. "You're briefed. Isabella has escalated. Marcus's exposure was only the beginning. We need someone who can anticipate her moves and counter them without drawing attention." Alexander's gaze flicked across the digital displays, absorbing information at a pace that was almost unsettling. "I see. And you want me involved because..." "Because," Roxanne interjected, "we can't trust anyone else. And frankly, neither of us can afford to be everywhere at once." Isabella's influence reaches far beyond what we know. We need someone who can operate in her blind spots. Alexander considered this for a long moment, then nodded. I'll help, but understand this: she's adaptive. Every action we take will be met with a reaction, and sometimes the reactions will be unpredictable. Ethan's jaw tightened. We know that, but we have no choice. We either adapt or fall. Alexander's presence was a game changer. His insight allowed them to see vulnerabilities they had previously overlooked, and his strategies provided a layer of unpredictability that Isabella would not easily counter. Over the following days, Ethan and Roxanne, with Alexander's guidance, began to dismantle Isabella's network methodically. Each operation revealed more of her strategies and motivations. Yet with each victory, the tension between them grew, not just professionally, but personally. Ethan found himself increasingly aware of Roxanne's proximity, the subtle ways she moved, the quiet intensity of her gaze. There was a tension, almost electric, that neither could fully acknowledge. In the midst of strategy sessions and high-stakes operations, their connection simmered beneath the surface, an unspoken acknowledgement of attraction intertwined with mutual respect and reliance. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of surveillance and counterintelligence, Roxanne and Ethan found themselves alone in the safe house. The city outside was quiet, but the air inside was charged with unspoken energy. You've changed since this began, Roxanne said softly, breaking the silence. You've become sharper, more calculated, but also more human, more aware of what's at stake. Ethan studied her, a mixture of fatigue and admiration in his expression. I've had to adapt, and I've had to trust you in ways I never thought I could. You've become indispensable. There was a pause, pregnant with possibility. Roxanne's eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. Indispensable isn't a word I hear lightly. Ethan's fingers brushed against hers momentarily, a fleeting contact charged with meaning. And it isn't. But right now, we need to focus. Emotions can be a liability. She nodded, though the tension lingered, a reminder that beneath the layers of strategy and danger, something real was emerging between them. Just as Ethan and Roxanne began to feel a semblance of control, Isabella struck. The first sign was subtle, a misdirected message, a minor disruption in their surveillance network. But soon, the attacks escalated. Confidential files disappeared, secure channels were compromised, and allies were questioned or removed from their positions. Ethan's mind raced as he assessed the damage. She's testing us, he said, voice taut with urgency. Every move we make, she's observing, analyzing, and preparing a response. Roxanne's fingers flew over the keyboard, analyzing patterns, tracing origins, and anticipating next steps. She's also planting misinformation. If we react without verification, we risk falling into a trap. Alexander leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. She's bold, but boldness can be predictable. She has a signature, an approach she relies on. If we exploit that, we can force her hand. Ethan nodded. Then we do it. We force her to make the first real mistake. The plan was complex. A series of controlled leaks, false vulnerabilities, and staged communications designed to manipulate Isabella's perception. Every move required precision, coordination, and nerves of steel. Late that night, the operation reached a critical point. Isabella's response was swift and decisive, revealing both her intelligence and her willingness to push boundaries. Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander coordinated a counter-operation, each aware that one misstep could unravel everything. The confrontation was intense, a battle of wits and strategy. Isabella's manipulation was formidable, but Ethan and Roxanne's preparation, combined with Alexander's insight, allowed them to anticipate her moves and regain control. When the dust settled, the immediate threat had been neutralized, but the encounter left an indelible mark. Isabella's audacity and cunning were undeniable, and Ethan realized that their struggle was far from over. Every victory would be met with new challenges, and every decision carried immense consequences. After the confrontation, Ethan stood at the window, gazing at the city lights stretching across Washington. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders, but alongside it was a renewed sense of determination. He had allies he could trust, a partner who balanced intellect with intuition, and the skills to navigate the treacherous waters of power and deception. Roxanne joined him, her presence a steadying force. "You've been quiet," she observed, her tone gentle but probing. Ethan turned, meeting her gaze. "I've been thinking about the risks, about the challenges ahead, and about what we've built. We've become a team that can withstand anything, but only if we stay sharp, focused, and united." She nodded, a rare smile touching her lips. "Then we stay that way. No distractions, no missteps. We anticipate, adapt, and act decisively, and we watch each other's backs." The tension between them remained, a subtle undercurrent to their professional alliance. But for now, discipline and focus were paramount. Personal feelings, as powerful as they were, had to wait. With Isabella temporarily contained and their immediate threats neutralized, Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander began preparing for the next phase of their operations. Intelligence gathering intensified, new alliances were forged, and contingencies were refined. The landscape of power in Washington was shifting, and they had to remain ahead of the curve to survive. Ethan reflected on the journey so far, the betrayals, the alliances, the battles fought in shadows. Each step had been a test of intellect, courage, and resilience. And as he looked toward the uncertain horizon, he knew that the true challenges were only just beginning. But he also knew this, with Roxanne at his side, and allies like Alexander guiding the way, they could face any threat, confront any adversary, and navigate the dangerous currents of ambition and deception. Because in a world defined by shadows, strategy, and unspoken power, survival and victory belong to those who could anticipate, adapt, and act without hesitation. And Ethan Blackwood, ever vigilant and resolute, was ready to meet whatever the shadows had in store. Ethan sat in the dimly lit operations room, the hum of computers filling the air as he scrolled through the latest intelligence reports. Every piece of data, every intercepted communication, pointed toward a single truth. Isabella was far from finished. Her network was expanding again, recruiting from hidden corners, moving faster than they anticipated. It was as if every step they took forward, she anticipated 3 in advance. Roxanne leaned over his shoulder, tracing the lines on a map with a finger. "She's not just rebuilding, she's diversifying. New contacts, new channels, new fronts. We're seeing only the surface." Ethan didn't respond immediately, his mind racing through possibilities, potential traps, and contingency plans. Alexander stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "We need to hit her before she fully consolidates. Once she integrates these new resources, containment becomes exponentially harder." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Agreed. But the more we push, the more we risk exposing ourselves." Roxanne's gaze met his, sharp and unwavering. "We're already exposed. She knows about Marcus. She knows about the leaks. Every hour we delay, she strengthens her position. We act now, or we concede control." Ethan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Fine. We strike at dawn. Full coordination. Alexander, you handle infiltration. Roxanne, surveillance and counterintelligence. I'll oversee the operations and manage communications." The plan was ambitious, risky, and potentially explosive. Isabella's strength lay not just in her resources, but in her ability to anticipate reactions, to manipulate outcomes before anyone else could act. Ethan had spent sleepless nights calculating every angle, yet even now, doubt lingered at the edges of his mind. The hours until dawn were agonizing, filled with meticulous preparation and constant review of contingencies. Equipment checks, secure channel confirmations, and redundancy measures consumed them. Roxanne, usually composed, seemed unusually tense, her hands moving quickly but deliberately over her devices. Alexander, calm as ever, paced slowly, muttering under his breath as he reviewed potential escape routes and fallback strategies. Finally, the moment arrived. The city was cloaked in darkness, shadows stretching across empty streets. Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander moved in synchrony, each step calculated, each action timed with precision. Their objective was Isabella's temporary command hub, a facility hidden in a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Surveillance had confirmed its location, and intelligence suggested it was lightly guarded but heavily monitored. They had to be swift, silent, and decisive. Ethan signaled a halt as they approached the perimeter. He pressed a hand against Roxanne's arm, feeling the tension radiating from her. "Ready?" he whispered. She nodded, lips pressed in a firm line, eyes blazing with determination. Alexander crouched beside them, examining the security sensors. "Minimal coverage here. I can disable the external cameras for a 5-minute window. That's all the time you get." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Then let's move." They advanced, shadows among shadows, using the cover of darkness and the temporary blind spots Alexander had created. Every sense was heightened. Every noise, every flicker of light could signify danger. Inside the warehouse, Isabella's team was unaware of the approaching threat. The atmosphere was tense but routine, the operatives moving through their tasks with trained precision but complacency. Ethan and his team breached silently, neutralizing guards with minimal noise, moving toward the central operations room where Isabella was believed to be, coordinating her activities. As they closed in, a sudden alarm triggered a tripwire that had gone unnoticed. Red lights flashed, echoing through the warehouse, and a sharp siren cut through the silence. "She knew," Alexander muttered under his breath, eyes narrowing. She anticipated this. Chaos erupted. Isabella's operatives scrambled to secure the area, while Ethan and Roxanne ducked behind cover, exchanging quick gestures to coordinate their next moves. Alexander moved swiftly, taking down 2 guards and hacking into the central security terminal. The screens flickered and went dark momentarily, giving Ethan and Roxanne a brief window to advance. They burst into the main control room, and there she was, Isabella, calm and composed despite the alarm. Her eyes locked on Ethan, a smirk playing on her lips. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me," she said smoothly. Ethan's gaze was hard, controlled. "Your game ends here, Isabella." She chuckled softly, circling the room like a predator. "Ends? No, Ethan. This is merely the beginning. You think you understand the board, but you are always 3 moves behind." Roxanne stepped forward, voice steady but laced with warning. "We're not here to play games. Step aside, or you'll regret it." Isabella's smirk widened, but there was a flicker of something beneath it, an acknowledgement of the threat, a recognition of their capability. "You underestimate me, as always," she said, and in that instant, the room's doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't a trap. They had anticipated some form of resistance, but the sheer audacity of her containment measure shocked him. Alexander moved to the terminals, attempting to override the electronic locks, but Isabella had fortified them beyond casual hacking. "She's anticipated even this," Alexander muttered, frustration evident. Roxanne scanned the room, eyes darting between exits and potential hazards. "We improvise. We adapt. That's the only way we survive this." The tension was palpable, each second stretching like hours. Isabella watched them, analyzing, assessing, calculating. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke. "I admire your persistence. Few dare to challenge me directly, but you should know every choice you make now will cost someone dear to you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "We accept the risk." Isabella's eyes glinted with amusement and warning. "Do you? Or are you merely pretending? Because every move you make plays into my design. Every ally, every plan, every emotion. You are predictable." Ethan exchanged a glance with Roxanne, recognizing the truth in her words. They were in her world now, a realm where psychology, manipulation, and strategy interwove seamlessly. The battle was no longer just physical. It was mental, emotional, a test of endurance and wit. Isabella advanced slowly, deliberately, keeping her distance but never breaking eye contact. "I wonder how far you'll go to protect your precious allies," she murmured. Ethan's mind churned through scenarios, each riskier than the last. "We'll find out," he said finally. Roxanne's hand brushed his, a fleeting contact, but a grounding one. Together, they formulated a plan, quick, decisive, and dangerous. Isabella might have anticipated their approach, but she could not predict intuition, courage, and desperation combined. Ethan feigned a step to the left, drawing Isabella's attention while Roxanne circled behind her, moving toward the terminal controls. Alexander provided covering support, intercepting operatives trying to flank them. The room became a whirlwind of motion, bodies moving with precision, minds calculating outcomes in split seconds. The tension almost tangible. Isabella's composure faltered slightly, a shadow crossing her otherwise unflappable demeanor. She realized, perhaps too late, that her own arrogance had become a vulnerability. Roxanne reached a terminal and initiated a bypass sequence, fingers flying over the keys. Sparks flickered as the locks began to disengage. Ethan and Alexander engaged the remaining operatives, neutralizing threats efficiently but cautiously. Every misstep could trigger disaster. Finally, with a sharp hiss, the doors unlocked, and a narrow escape path opened. Ethan motioned to Roxanne and Alexander. Go! Now! They moved in synchrony, slipping past Isabella's stunned realization. The alarms continued to blare, but their coordinated efforts allowed them to exit the warehouse unscathed. Outside, the cool night air hit them like a balm after the suffocating intensity inside. Ethan paused, chest heaving, eyes scanning the perimeter. We made it, but she'll strike back. Harder, faster, smarter. Roxanne nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And we'll be ready. We've seen her. We've tested her limits. She may adapt, but so do we. Alexander exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. This isn't over. It will never be over. But tonight, we survived. And that matters. Ethan's gaze lingered on the warehouse in the distance, the faint glow of red alarms still flashing. Isabella's laughter, quiet but distinct, echoed in his mind. She was far from defeated. This confrontation was merely a prelude to the deeper challenges ahead. As they regrouped and strategized for the next phase, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the game had changed. Isabella had revealed a new layer of her cunning, a depth that demanded not only skill but ingenuity, resilience, and perhaps a willingness to embrace shadows they had not yet dared to explore. The night stretched onward, filled with the promise of conflict, the weight of strategy, and the relentless push toward an uncertain future. And amidst it all, Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander knew one undeniable truth. To face. Isabella was to face the constant tension between risk and reward, between trust and deception, and between survival and victory. Their journey was far from over, but each step forward solidified their resolve. They had tasted danger, dense with shadows, and emerged unbroken. And they would continue because in a world ruled by cunning and ambition, only those who could anticipate, adapt, and act without hesitation could hope to endure. The city awoke to a gray morning, fog rolling over empty streets and the faint hum of distant traffic. Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander returned to their safe house. But the quiet was deceptive. Every shadow outside the reinforced windows felt like a potential threat. Every passing vehicle a possible tale. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on them, the adrenaline giving way to exhaustion and unease. Ethan slumped into a chair, hands pressed over his face. The exhilaration of survival had faded, replaced by the stark realization that Isabella had changed the rules. She wasn't just reactive, she was proactive, moving pieces on a board that none of them fully understood. Roxanne set down a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. You need to focus. Licking your wounds won't help anyone. Her voice was firm, but there was an edge of concern. Ethan lifted his gaze, eyes shadowed. I know, but every time we think we've cornered her, she slips further ahead. It's like trying to trap smoke. Alexander, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, let out a low whistle. She's not just playing chess, Ethan. She's rewriting the game entirely. And we're the ones scrambling to catch up. Ethan took a deep breath. Then we find the patterns. There has to be a pattern. Intelligence, surveillance, behavior, it's all data we can analyze. Roxanne nodded. And we start with her network. Every contact she's made, every resource she's mobilized in the past month. We map it all. Link it all. That's our first step. They worked in silence for hours, poring over intercepted communications, analyzing travel logs, and cross-referencing known associates. Patterns began to emerge, subtle at first, almost invisible in the flood of information. But gradually, a thread formed, a path that led to Isabella's broader network, a web of influence that extended far beyond the city's limits. She's expanding into new territories, Alexander noted, pointing at the digital map projected on the wall. Midwest, a few coastal cities, even small pockets in Canada. She's building an empire silently. Ethan leaned forward, fingers drumming against the table, which means we need to strike before her influence becomes uncontainable. But these aren't just isolated cells, they're integrated. Cutting one without alerting the others will be nearly impossible. Roxanne's eyes glimmered with determination. Then we adapt. We don't just react. We create scenarios where she reacts to us. Surprise is our only advantage now, ours. Blurred as they constructed detailed plans. Contingencies layered upon contingencies. Ethan knew that precision and timing were everything. One misstep, one miscalculation, could turn the operation into disaster. As night fell again, the city streets darkened. Ethan felt the weight of anticipation pressing down. They had identified a key asset in Isabella's network, a supplier who acted as a linchpin, coordinating movement of critical resources. Disrupting this link could destabilize her operations, but reaching it meant infiltrating a heavily guarded facility on the city's outskirts. "We move tonight," Ethan said finally, his voice low and steady. "Minimal exposure, precision strikes. We cut the head, then assess." Roxanne packed equipment meticulously: communication jammers, secure tablets, non-lethal and lethal options. Everything calibrated for efficiency. Alexander checked surveillance gear and entry devices, running multiple tests. The trio moved through shadowed alleyways, avoiding main roads, reaching the perimeter without incident. Ethan surveyed the building from a concealed vantage point. Guards patrolled methodically, cameras scanning with slow, deliberate sweeps. "We have two windows," he murmured. "Entry from the east side, minimal coverage. Exfiltration west, where cameras overlap but can be jammed for 3 minutes." Roxanne's fingers danced over the control pad. "I can create a loop in the cameras, but timing has to be perfect. Miss it by a second, and we're compromised." Ethan nodded, scanning the guards' patrol patterns, calculating every possibility. "Ready?" They moved as one, blending into shadows, advancing with the precision of trained operatives. Inside, the facility's hum was punctuated by clattering machinery and the occasional cough or shuffle from unsuspecting personnel. Ethan and Alexander neutralized guards silently, while Roxanne accessed terminals to extract critical data. Their progress was methodical, deliberate, but tension thickened with each step. Suddenly, a door creaked open. A guard, younger than the rest, stepped out, eyes wide in alarm. Ethan acted instantly, disarming and incapacitating him with careful efficiency. The danger passed, but the adrenaline spiked, muscles taut with the constant threat of exposure. They reached a central control room, where the linchpin coordinated shipments and communication. Roxanne tapped into the terminal, her eyes narrowing as she decrypted layers of security. "Got it," she whispered, tracking logs, supply routes, even encrypted contact lists. "Everything we need to dismantle this node." Alexander glanced at the screens, impressed. "This is the gold mine, but extracting it without alerting Isabella, tricky." Ethan formulated a plan on the fly. "We download what we need in 10-minute windows, staggered to avoid detection. We neutralize any patrols quietly, then we leave. No confrontation unless necessary." Minutes stretched like hours. As they executed the plan, every noise, every flicker of light seemed amplified, signaling danger. Finally, the last file transferred. Roxanne disconnected the terminals, securing the data on encrypted drives. Ethan signaled them to move. Exfiltration was tense. Cameras flickered, sensors buzzed with potential alerts. But Roxanne's precise manipulations kept them under the radar. As they slipped outside, Ethan noticed a shadow detach from the darkness, a figure moving swiftly toward them. "Ambush," Alexander muttered, drawing his weapon. The figure halted abruptly. In the faint streetlight, Ethan recognized her: Isabella. Composed, eyes sharp and calculating, a faint smile on her lips. "Predictable," she said softly. "You think you can dismantle my operations piece by piece, but every action has consequences." Ethan steadied himself. "We're not here to play games. Step aside, or face the outcome." Isabella tilted her head, evaluating him. "Outcome? The outcome is already written. You merely participate in the narrative I've designed. You can't win because you refuse to see the whole picture." Roxanne and Alexander flanked, Ethan weapons ready, but they sensed that any sudden move could trigger disaster. Isabella's confidence radiated, an aura that made even trained operatives hesitate. "You've disrupted my network, yes," she continued, "but you've also signaled to me exactly how you operate. Every strength, every weakness, it's all laid bare." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then we adapt. We're not finished, Isabella. Not now. Not ever." She laughed softly, a sound that was more chilling than any threat. "Brave, foolish, admirable, all at once. You are entertaining, Ethan, but you must understand you are always chasing. Always." Without another word, she stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. Ethan exhaled, chest tight with the tension of the encounter. Roxanne and Alexander mirrored his reaction, a shared understanding passing silently between them. Isabella was not just a threat, they were engaged in a battle of wits, endurance, and nerve. Back at the safe house, they reviewed the extracted data. The files revealed supply chains, communication channels, and key operatives information that, if leveraged correctly, could destabilize Isabella's network. But the files also contained hints of a larger plan, one that extended beyond the immediate region and suggested a long-term strategy that none of them had anticipated. "This isn't just about territory," Roxanne noted, scrolling through decrypted communications. "She's building influence, power, and leverage on a scale we didn't anticipate." "Disrupting one node isn't enough," Ethan nodded, brow furrowed. "Then we hit multiple nodes simultaneously. Coordinated strikes across locations, timing, and precision. We force her to spread herself thin." Alexander's voice was measured but grim. "And risk more exposure. Every additional move increases the chance she anticipates, manipulates, or counters. But if we do nothing, she consolidates and becomes untouchable." Ethan leaned back, eyes closing for a brief moment. The weight of responsibility pressed down, the stakes higher than ever. Yet within that pressure, a resolve hardened. Isabella had challenged them, but she had also revealed patterns, weaknesses, and avenues of influence. They would use them, turning her arrogance against her. As dawn approached, Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander prepared for the next phase, a series of coordinated strikes that would test every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage they possessed. The city was silent, unaware of the storm gathering on its outskirts. And somewhere, in the shadows of her growing empire, Isabella was watching, calculating, anticipating. The game was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning. Every step, every decision, every heartbeat carried the potential to change the balance of power. The tension between pursuit and evasion, between strategy and instinct, between loyalty and survival, defined their existence now. Ethan stared out the window, watching the city stir to life. He felt the pulse of impending conflict, the thrill of the challenge, and the undeniable truth that nothing would ever be the same again. They had gained ground, yes, but Isabella had also set the stage for a confrontation that would demand everything they had and more. And as the first light of morning touched the rooftops, Ethan knew one certainty: the next encounter would be decisive, dangerous, and unforgettable. The city's skyline was ablaze with the orange hue of dusk, shadows stretching long over streets now alive with the rhythm of evening. Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander had prepared meticulously for this moment, the culmination of months of surveillance, infiltration, and calculated strikes. Every piece of intelligence they had gathered, every maneuver they had executed, had led to this inevitable confrontation. Isabella's network had fractured under their coordinated efforts, but she was no ordinary adversary. Her mind operated several moves ahead, and every action they took seemed anticipated, every decision mirrored in her strategic play. Ethan stared at the digital map projected in the safe house, a complex lattice of lines and nodes representing the remnants of Isabella's operations. "This is it," he said, voice steady but tinged with tension. "Every route, every operative we've identified is either neutralized or under our surveillance. We go in tonight and end this." Roxanne's eyes reflected the faint glow of the screens, sharp and unwavering. "She's expecting something," she noted. "We need to be unpredictable, move in waves, staggered, and maintain communication silence until the final phase." Alexander, running a final check on weapons and equipment, added, "And we have to be ready for deception. She could be setting traps, diversions, or even baiting us directly. We can't underestimate her, Ethan nodded, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down. The plan was audacious. Simultaneous strikes on multiple key locations, designed to cut off Isabella's power nodes, trap her operatives, and force her hand. Any misstep would mean disaster, but hesitation was not an option. As night fully descended, the trio moved out, slipping through the labyrinth of streets with calculated precision. The city, unaware of the silent war unfolding within its shadows, pulsed around them, cars honking in the distance, the faint hum of neon signs, the occasional siren cutting through the night. They reached the first location, a warehouse where one of Isabella's remaining supply chains operated. Ethan signaled, and they breached silently, incapacitating guards and securing the area. Roxanne moved quickly, extracting data from terminals while Alexander monitored security feeds. Each strike was surgical, efficient, and swift. As they progressed through the night, moving from one strategic point to another, Ethan's mind remained sharp, aware of the ever-present risk of exposure. They had predicted her movements based on intercepted communications, patterns of supply, and the behavior of her remaining operatives. Yet, a nagging feeling persisted. Isabella's presence was palpable, as if she existed just beyond their perception, orchestrating outcomes without revealing herself. Their final target was a high-rise in the city's financial district, a hub where Isabella coordinated her remaining influence. The building was fortified, cameras scanning in complex sequences, security personnel stationed at every entrance. Ethan and Alexander moved first, using blind spots and shadows to navigate floors, while Roxanne prepared to disable surveillance and create diversions. As they approached a penthouse suite, the air thickened with tension. The faint hum of electricity, the distant city noises, the subtle creaks of the building all seemed amplified in the silence. Ethan gestured for a halt. "This is it. She's here. I can feel it." Roxanne's fingers hovered over the control panel, ready to loop cameras and override security. Alexander's eyes darted, scanning for any sign of movement. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened, and Isabella emerged, composed and elegant, her presence commanding every inch of the space. "You've come far," she said softly, voice smooth yet carrying an unmistakable edge. "Impressive coordination. But you still don't see the full picture." Ethan stepped forward, fists clenched. "It ends tonight, Isabella. No more games." Isabella tilted her head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing at her lips. "And, oh, Ethan, this is only the climax of the game. The finale isn't as simple as you imagine." She raised a hand, and suddenly, alarms blared throughout the building. Red lights flashed. A voice over the intercom warned of intruders. Ethan and Alexander tensed, realizing it was a trap, but the question was, how deep did it go? Roxanne immediately engaged her overrides, but Isabella's systems were sophisticated, layered with redundancies that countered every maneuver. "She's prepared for this," Roxanne said through clenched teeth. "Every action we take is being anticipated." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Then we improvise. Focus on survival first, then strategy." The confrontation became chaotic. Guards appeared seemingly from nowhere, corridors twisted with deceptive layouts, and automated defenses activated. Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander fought with precision, neutralizing threats while advancing toward Isabella. Yet, despite the intensity, Isabella maintained an unshakable composure, observing, directing, almost orchestrating the chaos. They cornered her in a grand hall, the city lights streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting her silhouette with brilliance. Ethan approached cautiously. "It's over. Surrender." Isabella's eyes glimmered with defiance. "Over? No, Ethan. It's always been about perspective. You think your victories matter? They only led you here, to this moment where you see me clearly, for the first time." A tense standoff ensued. Ethan and Alexander positioned themselves strategically, weapons ready, while Roxanne monitored every exit and potential reinforcements. Isabella's hand moved subtly, and in an instant, the room's lighting shifted, revealing hidden operatives poised to strike. "You underestimate me," she whispered. The battle ignited. Movements were swift, lethal, and precise. Ethan dodged, countered, and maneuvered through Isabella's operatives with calculated force. Roxanne hacked security overrides mid-combat, turning the environment to their advantage. Alexander provided backup, neutralizing threats with controlled, efficient strikes. Yet, Isabella remained elusive, moving with uncanny agility, anticipating their every move. Ethan realized that defeating her physically was only part of the solution. They had to outthink her, anticipate her strategy. As they pressed forward, Ethan recalled a critical detail from the data Roxanne had extracted. Isabella's network, no matter how vast, relied on a central node of communication, a vulnerability they had identified but not exploited fully. Roxanne, the drives, feed the virus into the central node, he shouted amidst the chaos. Roxanne nodded, weaving through guards to access the terminal, fingers flying over the keyboard. She uploaded the pre-prepared program designed to destabilize Isabella's command systems. The effect was immediate. Automated defenses faltered, operatives hesitated, and the complex control systems she relied upon began to collapse. Isabella's expression flickered, the first sign of uncertainty crossing her features. Ethan seized the moment, advancing toward her. "It's over," he repeated. Isabella's eyes narrowed, calculating, assessing. Yet there was no immediate escape. "Perhaps in this room, yes," she admitted softly, "but power is never truly contained. You may win the battle, but the war, that is eternal." Ethan didn't falter. With a final, decisive move, he incapacitated her, ensuring she could not activate any hidden contingencies. Guards and remaining operatives, disoriented by the virus Roxanne had deployed, surrendered or fled. Silence settled over the grand hall, broken only by the hum of failing electronics and the distant sounds of the city. Roxanne exhaled, collapsing against a wall. "We did it," she murmured, exhaustion and relief mingling in her voice. Ethan remained vigilant, ensuring no surprises. Alexander approached, nodding grimly. "It's done, for now." They secured Isabella, restraining her carefully, aware that her influence, even contained, remained dangerous. The city, oblivious to the near collapse of a hidden empire within its boundaries, continued its rhythm. Dawn approached slowly, painting the skyline with hues of gold and crimson. Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander stood together, silent for a moment, reflecting on the night's events. They had dismantled Isabella's network, confronted her directly, and emerged victorious, but the cost was evident in their fatigue, in the tension etched across their faces, in the knowledge that true peace was a fleeting illusion. As authorities arrived, informed of the situation by evidence Roxanne had carefully prepared, Isabella was taken into custody. Yet, even in chains, her gaze remained sharp, unyielding, and enigmatic. "You think this is the end?" she said quietly as they led her away. Ethan watched, feeling the weight of the encounter. "No," he replied softly, "but it is the end of your control. That's enough for now." Days passed, the city returning to a semblance of normalcy. Though the trio knew the undercurrents of power, deception, and ambition never truly vanished. Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander worked to dismantle the remnants of Isabella's influence, ensuring no lingering threats remained. The process was painstaking, meticulous, and necessary. Yet, amid the work, a sense of accomplishment lingered. They had faced an opponent unlike any other, tested their limits, and emerged not only victorious but wiser, more resilient, and more unified. In the quiet moments, Ethan reflected on the journey, the twists, the betrayals, the strategy, and the raw human emotions that had defined the struggle. Isabella had been formidable, but they had persevered through courage, intellect, and unwavering collaboration. Roxanne and Alexander joined him, and together, they looked out over the city from the safe house, the morning sun casting light on streets that, for now, were free from shadowed manipulation. "It's over," Roxanne said again, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Ethan nodded. "For now," Alexander added, "until the next challenge. But we'll be ready." They shared a quiet understanding. Life would always present new trials, new adversaries, new complexities, but they had proven their capacity to face them together. And in that realization, A calm settled over them. A rare moment of peace earned through relentless struggle and unyielding resolve. The city stretched endlessly below, oblivious to the titanic battle that had occurred in its hidden layers. Yet, in that silence, there was triumph, resilience, and the quiet promise that no matter the adversary, no matter the cunning or the chaos, courage and unity would prevail. The sun rose fully, golden light spilling over rooftops, illuminating streets and buildings. And for the first time in months, Ethan, Roxanne, and Alexander allowed themselves to breathe, to savor the victory hard won. The chapter of Isabella had ended. Her empire dismantled, her power neutralized. But the lessons, the strength, and the bond forged in the crucible of conflict remained indelible, shaping the future and anchoring them to an unwavering truth that together, they could face anything. And as they stepped into the city, ready to rebuild, recover, and continue their work, the horizon stretched wide and unbroken, promising new beginnings beyond the shadows of the past.